Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every other Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, Kim. We are about to get into our discussion. The discussion of the faith, the hope, and the trick. This episode was written by David Greenwalt, directed by James A. Cottner, and the DVD blurb is: a charismatic slayer named Faith shows up in Sunnydale and quickly wins over Buffy's mother and all of Buffy's friends.
That is actually a really good blurb. It doesn't give away any information.
Yeah,
about what happens.
You're giving away the selling point of ooh, new Slayer in town, which I know was in the trailers. I remember the trailer for this episode because I remember that line from Oz being in the trailer of this episode. I don't know why I remember, because obviously I wasn't watching Buffy at that point, but I remember the trailer for this episode. So we start this episode with a song, actually. It's called Going to Hell by the Brian Jonestown Massacre. And it is a mouthful. It is playing while Willow and Oz are standing at the edge of the Sunnydale High School campus, and Willow is very anxious and talking about how giddy she is, and all the freedom that they have as seniors, and how it has to be savored. And as Oz and Willow are standing there, Xander and Cordelia approach from behind, and Xander and Oz thrust Willow into that freedom, and she's not ready.
Yes, she's very resistant. She's not ready to leave campus because they might have changed the rules to trick her.
Yeah. It's one of those Willow things where she kind of gets super excited about something and also super stressed all at once. And the panic really kind of reminds me of when she was first asked to cover for Jenny in her class. And she was just like, well, what if there's a fire drill? What if there's a fire? It was very reminiscent of that for me.
Yeah, it very much seemed like that. So they are going toward Buffy, who is across the street in a park, to have a picnic lunch.
Yeah. Have we established that there's a very nice park right across the street from Sunnydale High? Is that consistent throughout?
I don't know if it ever comes up again. There was an episode in season 1 when it was a graveyard.
Yeah, but it was like it was a portal into a graveyard, though, and it might have been a portal that was in a park that led to a graveyard. Possibly.
I don't think we ever go there across the street again or see it besides this episode. But Cordelia and Xander and Willow and Oz head toward Buffy, where she has spread out, according to the script book, a stunning array of decorative fruit, breads, cold cuts.
Yeah. You don't
really see it. That's why I said that.
It doesn't linger on it much, but if you actually look at what she's sitting out, it's pretty impressive. It's a lot for a high schooler.
Okay, so I didn't notice them showing it at all.
Well,
when I watched.
Yeah, she's sitting it out. They don't show it up close, but when she's sitting it out, you're just like, those are some big trays of food. I mean, it's not just peanut butter and jelly and Ziplocs, which is what I would do if I was bringing food to my friends in high school or Taco Bell. They comment on the food, and she talks about how much time she has on her hands after some well-placed Martha Stewart jokes. I did write. Later, we discover that she's actually a witch, right? Martha Stewart. She's a witch. Canon in the Buffyverse. I believe that's correct.
I think at some point. Yeah. Then they see a boy, Scott Hope, who is walking by, and Willow mentions that he has a crush on Buffy and that maybe they could date. Maybe she's ready. Mm-hmm. Which, throughout this episode, I feel like Willow is very, very pushy about Buffy dating.
Oh, yeah.
Which it seems un-Willow-like, especially considering that we're only 2 to 3 months at most away from her having to kill the love of her life.
Yeah. And
so that seems like it would take longer to get over.
So this is the first instance of me realizing just how very clunky this episode is. This is a very clunky episode, way more than I remembered it being. And Willow kind of pushing for this relationship right after they just had the conversation about being too coupley around Buffy. So it's almost like Willow's just like, ooh, we're all coupled up. We need Buffy to be coupled up with somebody so everybody can be coupled up. They've done this with Willow before, and it never really works for me. Like Willow kind of pushing this idea of Buffy moving on or having a love interest. It doesn't seem like something that Willow would push for Buffy or prioritize as something that she needs to, like, she's not only like suggesting it, but she like throughout this episode strategically arranges things to where Buffy and Scott will be in the same place at the same time, kind of like manipulation. I'm just like, woo, Willow.
Yeah. It seems like a lot. And I feel like several storylines in this episode are abbreviated. Is that the right word?
I can kind of see what you're saying.
They're not completed.
Yeah.
Or fleshed out the way they should be.
Yeah.
Like, there should be way more story of Faith and why she's there and her watcher and all that. And it seems like it's just kind of rammed in there at the last minute.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, Faith's the interesting part of this. Like, we don't care about Scott. Even at this point, we don't care about Scott.
No. Do we ever?
Like Faith's way more interesting than Scott would have been in multiple seasons of runtime had they kept him around. In this single episode, Faith is more interesting than he would have been.
I mean, and isn't it Scott? I think there's like one more episode before he breaks up with her.
Yeah, it's like a 3-episode arc with Scott Hope. He's not the best of characters, and he gets quite a bit of screen time in this episode, and I'll talk about him as this, continues. But yeah, Willow the Wingman, saying that Scott likes Buffy and wanted to ask her out the previous year, but Buffy wasn't ready. But now she thinks that she's ready and that she should do that thing she does with her mouth.
That boys like.
Which I wrote, does Willow also like that thing that Buffy does with her mouth?
It's a very funny exchange between her and Oz here, where she tells Oz, you're supposed to stop me when I do that. And he says, I like when you do that.
There's some awkward highs between Scott and Buffy. And Willow is very optimistic about this relationship.
Oh, yeah. She gets real excited.
And even brings up the half smile thing again.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's when they start, for some reason, talking about Buffy doing normal stuff. And Willow suggests, like, date. And it's actually kind of suggested here that Buffy does want to date, which I feel like doesn't match the tone of a lot of stuff that happens in this episode, too. I think this is one of those more rushed things you were talking about, like the not quite finished what they were trying to do here with Buffy kind of wanting to date but being hesitant to move on. Mm-hmm. Because it never really lands right for me. It's just like a tug of war more than a cohesive, like, okay, this is when she kind of changes over. And yeah, I mean, how do you go from Angel to Scott Hope?
Yeah, that's a big difference, going from that dramatic of a relationship to what would probably be
to
a very,
a Buster
very,
Keaton festival.
Yeah, a very, very calm, not supernatural type relationship. She's not ever going to be able to tell Scott, about being a Slayer or.
Yeah, so it's weird on multiple levels. But yeah, in this, even though like the kind of forced Buffy's ready to date storyline that it doesn't really go anywhere beyond the fact that it feels forced. Like,
yeah,
because we already discussed Scott Hope's in it for like 3 episodes. At the very end of this episode, we get Angel back. This is not what the audience is invested in, and it's like forcing this down our throats, making Willow act out of character, and giving us a lot of time to someone who doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But
well, and pretty much at the end, the second that we see Angel come back, nobody cares about Scott.
Nobody cares.
We're all like, okay, she's going to get back with Angel.
Yeah. This is not going to be the epic love triangle right here. It's not going to be Buffy, Angel, Scott. Who is she going to choose?
Oh, no, that comes later.
But it's all okay because at the end of this scene, we get the lovely line of...
All right, yes, date and shop and hang out and go to school and save the world from unspeakable demons. I want to do girly stuff.
And then we go to night, and there is a fast food restaurant, and it's apparently called Happy Burger.
Not happy. It's not happy. I'm not.
It's not a happy burger.
It's not. I'm not happy here. Everything's creepy. I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a fast food restaurant in Sunnydale. Could it be anything other than creepy? A long black limo pulls up to the order window, and we hear the takeout guy say, "Welcome to Happy Burger." And a man in the back seat of the limo orders a diet soda medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he was thirsty and just wanted a medium diet soda.
Yeah.
He sits there while he's waiting and starts talking to a man who's kind of all in black at first. And Mr. Trick is talking about the town and how it's quaint and also Hello Darkness because it makes DC look like Mayberry and how nobody cares about it. And then the man beside him, whose name is Kakistos, lays a hand on his arm, and it's a hoof, and says, "We're here for one thing, to kill the Slayer." Well, Mr. Trick says to kill the Slayer. At this point, the takeout guy gives Mr. Trick his soda, and they close the window, like it's over, but continue to sit there and talk for a little bit longer. Then Mr. Trick decides he's hungry and reaches in and pulls the drive-thru guy out into the car. And they drive off with his legs sticking out the
Some fast food.
Yeah, I find it really strange that they just continue to sit there. That part bothers me a lot.
It's like the driver.
It's kind of awkward.
The driver knows, like, the whole cinematic timing that Mr. Trick's going for, of having to wait to have the perfect line to say before he snacks on the drive-through kid. Like, that's just... And then once the drive-through kid's pulled through, then the driver's like, all right, now we can go forward.
Pretty much.
Very coordinated. So I did write that at least the writers are, I guess, trying to be a little self-aware, I guess, when they have the fact that Sunnydale is strictly of the Caucasian persuasion. Mr. Trick falls into that category that we've talked about a little bit about representation and how Mr. Trick could have been a really cool character, is a really cool character, but wasn't really developed enough and left long enough to become as cool as he could have been. But I like Mr. Trick.
I do too. They could have done so much more.
Yeah. I think he and Faith have such strong personalities, which again, since this episode's called Faith, Hope, and Trick, and these are our three characters that were being introduced, it just makes Scott Hope seem all the worse, because his personality is just so flat compared to these other two just big personalities. But yeah, I am excited for at least the little bit of time that we'll have with Mr. Trick. So from there, we go to the opening credits and come back to the Bronze, and we have, believe it or not, Third Eye Blind, the background, playing as Buffy and Angel are dancing in a very, like, melancholy Bronze scene. Like, there's not a lot of activity going on in this Bronze. It's a very quiet night there, as the slow dance, and the people who are there, which includes Oz, Willow, Cordelia, and Xander, are just completely zoned out, devoid of expression. And then we have this exchange about Buffy missing Angel, and they're just kind of dancing, and we see the Claddagh rings on their hands, and Buffy's falls off, and then there's kind of this awkwardness, and she watches him reach down and pick it up, and then he squeezes it and blood starts to flow from both his hand and his chest as she explains that she had to, and he's just like, I loved you, and then starts screaming at her to go to hell because he did. So yeah, another one of these dreams that we love. And I have a whole little spiel about this. So I want to talk about the literal versus the figurative. Buffy figuratively killed Angel in surprise when they made love and Angel lost his soul and became Angelus. And you have that whole thing about your boyfriend is dead. And she kind of had to make her peace with that during the last arc of season 2. But then the curse happened and Angel came back again and had to be punished again for Angelus's crimes. And Buffy had to literally kill Angel this time when he came back and Akafla was going to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, Buffy's dealing with the trauma of killing Angel twice almost. Which I'm not exactly sure what in this scene made me realize that, but holy crap, that is what she has lived through. Because she felt like she killed him when he lost his soul, and then she actually killed him.
Yeah.
So she's doing great. Totally ready to date.
Well, Willow seems to think so anyway. She wakes up, in the script book, it says that she wakes up screaming, but that doesn't happen in the actual show. She just wakes up kind of breathing hard. Then we see Joyce in the doorway, and she says, "Morning, sunshine. Are you ready to face the beast?" And the next scene, we are in Principal Snyder's office, and he is telling Buffy the terms of her re-entry into school. And the first one I have questions about. He says, 1, that you have to pass a makeup test for every class you skipped out on last year. And right away, I'm like, what, skipped out on? Really? Because I think you expelled her. You know, she was expelled. She didn't, it's not like she skipped out on them. Now, I mean, I feel like even if he hadn't expelled her, she probably would not have gone back to school the day after murdering Angel.
Probably not.
To hell to take her
probably
finals.
Would have taken a personal day.
Yeah, but he still, you know, what he did happened first, so he can't say she skipped out.
Yeah. It's almost as if Snyder is a tremendous bully that doesn't own up to any of the influence that he had on Buffy missing out on those tests and puts all the blame on this young teenage girl.
Something like that. The next one, he says that you provide in writing a glowing recommendation from any member of the faculty who is not an English librarian. And when he says this, I have a question. So we figured out from like the clues and the little things of Snyder talking to police officers and the mayor and stuff that he probably knows that Buffy is the Slayer. Mm-hmm. Or he knows that the mayor dislikes her a lot for some reason, and that's why he does. Do you think that he knows that Giles is connected to her? Or that the mayor knows that Giles is her watcher? Because if he does, why don't they just fire Giles?
Yeah, and you also have to take into account that Giles literally threatened Snyder in the previous episode, which is why I have so much problem with that scene. Because again, why wouldn't you just fire him?
Right, especially if they know that, like, if they know that Buffy's a Slayer, they probably know about Slayers and know enough to know they have watchers. And, I mean, even watching from the outside, you can tell that Buffy and Giles have a relationship that's not exactly teacher-student.
Well, Joyce couldn't. Joyce couldn't
or
figure
library student. Librarian student. So they would figure that he's probably the watcher.
Yeah.
So why let him work there and have so much contact with her day after day?
I mean,
they could at least make it harder.
The initial plan even was kind of dumb. Like, why give Buffy all of this free time by expelling her from school? Like, we talked about all of this, which is funny. She even makes the comment earlier when she makes the, like, epic picnic for everybody. She's like, I just have so much free time. And I'm just like, how? You didn't even really go to class all that much, but still, it's still like, what's the ultimate goal? Which I guess it worked out for the short term because she did run away from Sunnydale, but it wasn't because she was expelled from school that she did that.
Oh yeah, that was most definitely trauma.
Yeah. But his final one is that she must complete an interview with the school psychologist, which, okay, and that they must conclude that Buffy's violent tendencies are under control. So wouldn't that be like the easiest person for Snyder to manipulate to prevent Buffy from getting readmitted?
You would think so.
Like, this is what Snyder does.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, throughout all of this, Buffy's not even really paying attention, playing with a letter opener. And Joyce is talking about Snyder's attitude and how she spoke with the school board, and that, yes, in fact, Snyder is required to educate children at a public school. Turns out that's part of what it is to have a public school. And Buffy says that she's really back in school because the school board overruled Snyder. That's like having his whole ability to do his job called into question.
I think what my daughter's trying to say is, nah, 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 nah.
Yeah, I love it.
It is a very nice mother-daughter bonding moment.
and then we get a little bit of foreshadowing because they leave the office and Snyder's left staring at them. And then his receptionist comes over the intercom and says, "It's the mayor on line 1." And this look of fear comes over his face.
You keep building up this mayor guy.
Yeah.
What's his deal?
And then we move to Willow and Buffy in the library, and they're walking toward the desk, talking about how great it is that Buffy is back in school. And Buffy asks, why did Giles want to see her? And was he mad? And then Willow says that, no, he just needed to see you, but have you ever noticed when he is mad, he makes a weird cluck-cluck sound with his tongue?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, Giles pops up behind the desk. And Willow's like, oh, hi, been there long?
So,
yeah.
The joke's funny, and the punchline at the end of the scene's funny. But it's also interesting because you have this line of Buffy worried again about Giles being mad. And we talked about in the last episode that Giles was like the only one who wasn't really mad. So I wonder if there's a part of Buffy that's still kind of hanging on to the idea that Giles is mad about something. But it's also weird because they enter the library, and then as Buffy leaves, she takes a stack of books that are clearly, like, meant for her, that I guess were pulled by somebody, Willow, Giles, somebody, for her when she got back into school. But then she's just like, so, like, what are we doing here?
Well, she, I guess, realized those books were for her.
She's just like, either that or she just was just like, oh, I'm back in school, I need books, and then took a random pile of books that weren't actually hers, and Giles didn't correct her, and she's like, she'll do fine. Those aren't even for the classes she's taking, but she's fine.
And they have a conversation about Giles trying to put a protective binding spell around Acathla so that he can't come back, and wants to ask Buffy. He tries to ask Buffy questions about when she killed Angel. Buffy answers very generically and vaguely because she doesn't really want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And most of this scene is basically him trying to get information out of her and her not wanting to give it.
Yeah.
We have this little moment where Willow, after Buffy leaves, talks about some spells she's been doing, and she gets a little mini warning from Giles about how she shouldn't be playing around with these forces and conjuring stuff, which is like a little preview, a little bit more foreshadowing. This episode's got a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, the more, like, the more of this, the better, of just the slight tension, the slight apprehension that Giles has to Willow pursuing magic is just so beautiful for what we get later in the series. And I love that there's just these little seeds planted where Giles is just like, you know, this is serious, Willow. This is not something that you just need to casually do. Which Willow totally just casually does stuff all the time. It's kind of her thing when it comes to magic. But yeah. And then it ends with Willow kind of explaining what she has done, and then she asks Giles if he's mad, and Giles is like, no, of course not. If I were, I would be making a strange clicking sound with my mouth.
Which is great.
So yeah, I feel like the whole is Giles mad thing is definitely set up for that joke and that joke alone, but also I'm willing to tie it back to the previous episode and have some continuity there as well.
Then we go to Buffy in the bronze, and she walks up to Willow and Oz, who are making out on a couch. Willow says, Are you all glowy? And they talk about how she might be happy, and she says it's because she passed her English makeup test. And then Willow sees Scott coming and says, Hey, Scott, what are you doing here? At which point he totally sells her out and says that you told me if I came, I could run into Buffy. And it's very cute. He, says, I'm a bad liar. It's not good for the skin. It makes me blotchy, which is really cute. They talk about the music playing, and he asks her to dance, at which point Buffy completely loses her head and forgets how to answer a simple question. She stammers for a lot of I don't knows, no, yeah. And then Scott's just like, okay, I'm going to go over here. And if you want to dance, you just mosey on to me. And then he leaves, and Oz says the one thing that he thinks about Scott, and that is that he gets points for using the word mosey.
I mean, he does. Let's be fair.
No, I agree.
Let's be fair. That's a pretty good word. Prior to Buffy's forgetting how to complete a sentence, they talk about the song. Don't you love this song? Which is, in fact, Cure by Darlene Violetta. And they play 2 songs in this. They play Cure and then later Blue Sun. But what's more interesting about this band is they are responsible for the Angel theme song.
Are they?
Yes.
Did not know that. That's pretty cool.
So, can we talk? I think there's like a weird thing they do with Buffy's kind of less developed romantic suitors, where they kind of just go with this idea of this like really weird, over-the-top nice guy. I didn't really like Owen. I don't really like Scott. And then you get Parker, and Parker's literally the worst, because his is a full-on act. But even like Scott, like 180 so fast, and it's just like, yeah, I don't like, now that I have you, I'm not really into it anymore. Which I guess later we find out that he's gay, which is a weird retcon that they do really late in the series. And then Owen, it was kind of like that, just really weird, like nerdy, nice guy, but like wanted danger. I don't know, like, it's just, there seems to be some kind of pattern with these like generic nice guy types that we try to like stick into this. And you kind of did it a little bit with, what was his name? Was it like Tom or something? Nice guy Tom? That sounds familiar. From Reptile Boy, who actually wasn't a nice guy.
I do not remember what his name was, but no, he was definitely not a nice guy.
He was not a nice guy. But like, they just have like, is this what they think Buffy's type is? Because I don't feel like it matches like her longer term. Even like Riley, who was like that normal guy, like is still like way more interesting than Scott Hope, you know. I think even in the beginning, I have much more interest and investment in Riley before they even go into any of the quote-unquote interesting things about Riley, of the initiative and all this stuff, when he's just like a TA and is just like, I like school and nerdy things too, and, you know, I like education, and I'm just like, cool. But that like seems more genuine from him than it does from like someone like Owen, who's just like, man, poetry, man, right? Poems.
Yeah. I feel like Riley's the only one that they actually put effort into wanting the audience to like.
Yeah.
Like they do not care if you like Owen. They don't care if you like Scott. Not really.
Yeah. And Parker's designed to be hated. Yeah.
Everyone's supposed to hate Parker.
Yeah. So it's just weird, but I don't like, anytime I see these pairings, and like especially around Owen, I was just like, Buffy, stop. And I'll get into it again probably with Parker. I'll be like, Buffy, stop.
Yeah. Parker's lines, they're so cheesy. And I realize I'm a grown woman saying this about someone who's being like tricked as a freshman girl in college, but I don't know. I feel like even in college, I would have realized that these were lines. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's just, it feels weird because we talk about Buffy being so mature in so many aspects of her life, but when it comes to, like, the ability for guys to just trick her or kind of win her over in the stupidest ways, yeah. And, like, even, like, the guy who, like, for half a second she was kind of interested in Go Fish fits into this setup of just, like, putting on a face that's so clearly a front of, like, oh, I'm super nice and, like, have deep thoughts. And even if that was who that guy actually was and he wasn't just a skis ball, Buffy was already so bored with that. Like, she doesn't really want that. And it wasn't the fact that he assaulted her that was, like, the turning point for Buffy. Obviously, that was the, like, I'm gonna, you know, break this guy's arm or whatever she ended up doing. But at that point, she'd already checked out of any possible relationship with this guy because he was just the most boring. Oh, yeah. She was just like, I don't want to pursue this. This seems like the worst thing before he even got to the assault part. So it's not like this is what Buffy wants out of a relationship because we've seen that. She's not really interested in that. And I will forever say, like, in Reptile Boy, I think the attraction she had for that one guy, I think partly started as an attempt to make Angel jealous or to try to get away from Angel in some way because there was so much tension there at that point. Yeah. Because that was when they were full on in the will they, won't they go out for coffee or whatever their stupid shit was. But yeah, this is continuing a trend that we'll get again with Parker. And then to some extent, there's some of this reflected in Riley, but at least they took some time to expand on Riley enough to give him an actual character. Yeah. Maybe not a character everybody loves, but at least it's a character.
They at least tried to make you like Riley.
Yeah. They do something with it. Anyway, so Cordelia and Xander walk up, and this is when Cordelia points out the fact that there has been a very sultry dance going on this entire time between this girl in the stunning outfit. Just beautiful outfit, head to toe.
Okay. I was fixing to say, like, really? We're going to go with stunning for that? And then you said that about the outfit, and I got it. I want to point out that in the script book, very interesting, they describe Faith as a cross between motorcycle chick and trailer trash.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little harsh.
Yeah. So, Faith is dancing with a gentleman who is definitely out of time, and Buffy uses her, I'm doing air quotes, her air quotes, honing to determine that it is in fact a vampire. And so when Faith and the vamp leave, Buffy is quick to run after them, where she runs into Scott, who's super excited. He's like, hey, and she's like, hi, and then realizes, and she's like, oh no. Just a whole awkward back and forth, and Scott is confused. Yeah. It's just another few seconds that Scott takes from me.
Yeah, and I find this interesting that she gets up to go after Faith and the guy because she realizes it's a vampire. She starts walking out. Scott stops her, and they talk for, 10, 15 seconds? Mm-hmm. Then she continues going. The gang who was with her are still seated while she's talking to Scott. But then we see her walk out the door of the Bronze, and they're literally right behind her.
Oh, well, Buffy also stops and talks to another boy on the way out, giving them a chance to catch up.
Oh, okay. Is that what happens?
Yeah. She talks to Trent. Trent is also there.
Okay. Well, as long as we know she was talking to Trent. That seems like
another generic nice guy who's not actually a nice guy that Buffy would fall for, right? Trent? That seems like a good one. I'm going to write a fanfic about Trent.
Yeah, I have to read it.
So they get out, and they're like, where'd she go? And Cordelia's like, I bet it's nothing. They're probably just making out. And then we hear screaming, and Willow's like, that's not what making out sounds like, unless I'm doing it wrong, which is
kind of a weird comment.
Kind of a weird line. And yeah, they run up at this vamp that's got Faith pinned, and he's like, stop struggling, this won't hurt, and yeah, it hurts, but not who he thinks it's gonna hurt, as Faith grabs him and pushes him away and elbows him and just takes complete control of the scenario. Everybody runs up and is watching as she takes out this vampire handily and is just casually talking, saying, "Oh yeah, you're Buffy, right?" And introduces herself as Faith. And this is where Oz is just like, "Yep, that's a Slayer."
Yeah, there's a new Slayer in town. Faith proceeds to slay the vampire. That's great and all, yay. But then she just like walks by Buffy, hands her the stake, and walks away, assuming she's headed back to the Bronze. But she doesn't talk to Buffy or anything. She just hands her the stake and says thanks and walks away. But then in the next scene, it starts out with them all seated talking to her, and she mentions that she couldn't pass up the chance to meet the famous Buffy.
Mm-hmm. But she's still got to be cool, though, right? She's got to be cool.
But it wasn't. I mean, it was just rude. It was almost bitchy.
No. This is like badass teenage, recently discovered she has superpowers cool.
But it's really not. I mean, I guess they all follow her back in where she's sitting waiting for them to join her.
The sudden ways in which people are mesmerized by Faith. Like, I can kind of buy Xander because
he's got a thing for Slayers.
Yeah, he's got a thing for Slayers, and I have indeed seen Eliza Dushku, and I understand.
Well, yeah.
So, like, I can kind of buy Xander being mesmerized, especially when she's talking about, fighting things, being completely naked. That Xander would be interested in the story. But, like, even throughout this, like, Willow's, like, super on board. Giles is, like, super on board. They're all like, yay, Faith. And I'm just like,
wow.
Yeah, like, what has she done that's really that great? You've seen her dust one vampire and tell some stories that could be completely fake. We don't know. Like,
yeah, we have literally no proof that any of this is true.
Oh, man. But yeah, Faith is there telling stories. And after she's finished her story about having to fight off these vamps that were feasting off of people in a broke down church bus while she was completely naked, Xander makes a comment that they should film that story and show it every Christmas. Cordelia is not into this. And it's so over Xander, this entire scene.
Yeah, I like how when he keeps talking about Faith being naked, she's like, Xander, find a new theme.
Yes.
Which I actually like. When she says that, it's very, very Cordelia.
Mm-hmm. We also get the line of,
"Isn't it crazy how slaying just always makes you hungry and horny?"
Well, sometimes I crave a non-fat yogurt afterwards.
This is like one of the most telling Buffy lines in the history of the show.
It strikes me as funny that when Faith does say that, a little bit later, like right after that, Cordelia says, I get it. And then goes, not the horny yuck. When she is likely the most experienced one of this group.
Yeah. And like open about it. Like not shamed about it at all based on some other conversations that she's had. So, yeah. Essentially, we get some quick explanation that Faith was called when Kendra died, and
the line follows Kendra now.
Yeah. And that kind of explains the existence of Faith.
Which it honestly, at this point right here, it explains that basically the Slayer line follows Kendra now, or follows Kendra to Faith. So it does not follow Buffy anymore. After season 5, there is so much confusion about why there's not another Slayer when Buffy dies.
Mm-hmm.
It never made sense to me because, we figured this out back in season 3, that the line doesn't follow Buffy anymore. Sorry, just pointing that out.
Yeah, I get it. And I think there's even, I can't remember exactly when, maybe sometime in season 7, where even one of the characters says something to the likes that, like, Buffy would have to die for another Slayer to be called or something like that, which doesn't follow that path that we just talked about. But also, there's a part of me that wonders if there is a possibility that there was another Slayer line, like there's 2 Slayer lines, and that there was a Slayer that existed that was called after Buffy died the second time that created even a third line because Buffy came back again, that they just weren't aware of. Because I think there's a distinct possibility that there have been times where the Watchers Council just never found the Slayer. And especially in a situation where there was information kept, they may have not even been looking for her. They may have not been looking for another Slayer at that point. So there's a chance that there was just a Slayer out there somewhere during that time that had this whole, like, sudden burst of powers that had no idea what they were. Which I think is interesting. I think that would be a cool story to explore.
Yeah, that would be a really good story. That never occurred to me before. But it is possible because, after season 7, when they do the big spell to make all the potential Slayers, it kind of continues that storyline in that episode of Angel where the girl that's in the psychiatric hospital has become a Slayer and doesn't really understand it or anything. So that could be a thing that happened.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely feel like, just in general, there's probably a situation in which a Slayer could have existed for some period of time without the Watchers Council ever locating her. So I don't think that that's outside of the realm of possibility. So I think it could be possible that Buffy could also continue. And I think that that's more interesting than, like, the line just goes over to Kendra and then to Faith and then it's still just one Slayer line. That there's the potential for 2 Slayer lines or multiple because of Buffy's dying and coming back. But then, of course, we get to season 7 and then there's all the Slayers. So it kind of
not an issue
corrects itself to where you don't really have to have that question anymore because it's kind of a moot point. But it is something that I have thought about before, is the fact that maybe there was a Slayer that existed that nobody was aware of, because it turns out this world's pretty big and you can't always, know where all the Slayers are.
I think there would be some kind of, like, mystical energy or something that would help you find the Slayer if you're the Watchers Council.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of
things I think the Watchers Council should be able to do that they're just not able to do, apparently.
I agree with that statement. Okay, so where are we at in the show? We kind of got way off track.
So speaking of Watchers, Faith mentions that when her Watcher went off to a retreat in England, she figured it was the best chance to meet the infamous Buffy, and asks if Buffy used a rocket launcher one time, and Buffy's like, yeah, it's a funny story, and then she's immediately cut off by Xander, and Xander starts asking about apparently a story where Faith took on an alligator, and so Faith talks about this, and Xander again talks about her being naked, and there's this whole back and forth, and blah this, blah that, and Faith has a little tale here where she's like, I never had more trouble than that damn vamp, which is a big hint that vamp is in fact Kakistos, and that's the thing looming over her, because she kind of has that little moment. She asks Buffy what her toughest kill is, and then we have this terrible cut.
Oh yeah.
I hate it. It seems like it's not necessary, but, like, I would wonder, watching this scene without it edited in, if it would have been as impact. Like, I don't know at what point was it too much, like, to cut away and show that again.
Yeah. She doesn't want to answer, so she says they're all difficult.
Yes. And then she talks about the 3. And then
which were not a hard kill at all.
Well, she didn't even kill them.
Right. But, like, if you really want to consider her worst kills, I mean, like, what about the Master?
Yeah, like, what about that guy?
Yeah. Or der Kinderstad, or, I don't know, there were lots of them that I think were weird.
The 3...
Or, like, a lot, there were lots of them that were a lot harder than the 3.
The 3 was a weird thing to jump to. And it was just like, maybe they were just trying to tie it into more Angel stuff. I don't know. But like the 3, not only were they not that big of a deal, even though the show made them out to be a big deal, they were like, he's faced the 3. But Buffy didn't even kill them, so I don't know where she was going to go with that story, but it doesn't matter, because now Oz interrupts Buffy. This is something that's reoccurring here. I hope everybody's taking notes. That
Yep, and I find it odd that Oz did it.
Yeah. And this is, like, again, like one of those clunky things that happens, and it's going to happen again later in an even weirder way, but, like, it's just, like, trying to reinforce this idea that Faith's there to replace Buffy, to take over Buffy's life, that she's Buffy 2.0, and it's just weird. Like, anytime Buffy tries to talk, she's immediately, like, cut off, which I also kind of find funny. Maybe it's just my personality, but I really enjoy telling stories, and I enjoy listening to stories as well, but I really enjoy telling stories. So you'd think the Scoobies would be like, oh yeah, she used a rocket launcher, we were there.
Yeah.
They would be all in it. They're like, we do cool stuff too.
Well, and they are the next day at the school.
Yeah.
Willow and Xander are very much telling her where literally every bad thing happened to them.
Yeah.
So it's weird that they're not doing that at the Bronze.
Oz at least interrupts with like something that's a little bit more important than whether or not Faith was naked when she fought an alligator, and asks how Faith comes down on the side of werewolves, and explains that he is in fact been bitten by one, and she says that as long as you don't go scratching at me or humping my leg, we're 5 by 5. And this is it, Kim. This is it. This is the first 5 by 5. How do you feel?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
I really like Faith. I don't so much like her in this very first episode where she's trying too hard.
Yeah.
And it very, I guess rough is a good word.
Yeah.
I like her later when they like develop her character a little, but before she goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
Although I still really like her when she's bad too.
Yeah.
So
I really like the Faith arc. I really like the Faith redemption arc, which we'll get into and discuss at length when that time comes. But yeah, like this whole scene here, the like Faith kind of trying to, I think, like overcompensate or like make herself, it almost seems like she's trying to make herself sound cooler than she actually is. Like she's trying too hard in this. And I think it's like there's like some choices that are made when she's like gesturing that almost seem like a stage performance, when she's just like holding her hands in front of her face as she's talking and stuff like that. Like it almost feels like she's putting on a show, like she's acting, which she really is in a lot of ways. But yeah, there's just a lot of clunkiness in this scene and in the way that the dialogue flows, and it's all edited together. And I, like, at a certain point, I'm trying to figure out, like, how much of this is just a kind of a weird, things weren't kind of meshing together that they were supposed to, or how much of this is intentional. Because I feel like some of the Faith stuff is intentional, and obviously the people keep talking over Buffy is intentional, but then there's just a lot of stuff in this episode where I felt like the dialogue just didn't punch the way it normally does. Like the actors didn't bounce off of each other the way they normally do, and the scene wasn't cut the way that really shows off all of the witty dialogue bits. It felt more like everybody giving their line of dialogue rather than everybody having a conversation with each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and honestly, it feels like a lot of the scenes were unfinished. Mm-hmm. Like they could have kept going to make the scene more complete.
Yeah. And
it happens more than once in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Faith says...
When she says 5 by 5, which actually means...
Oh.
It could have several different meanings, but basically it is a phrase that radio operators used to use, which I guess is not very common anymore, but I guess some of them still do. And it means I read you loud and clear, or I understand you perfectly. And basically, as it's got into like slang language, it means everything's good. We're all good.
Yeah.
But you kind of figure that out from the way Faith uses it. But that is actually what it means.
Yeah.
Reading you loud and clear.
Reading you loud and clear. Which I knew it was something like that. I knew it was like a radio thing. I couldn't remember the exact, like, what it was going for. But it like, I never really struggled to determine what Faith was meaning when she said it. Because I also, like, I'm used to watching Buffy and the fact that their lingo is very specific and sometimes they just make up words. You know, that Buffy speak thing. So that just blends into it. But I do find it funny that they actually make a comment at one point, like, nobody knows what it means. Nobody knows what 5x5 means. I'm just like, it's not that complicated.
Right?
I think it's Willow that says, I was like, Willow, you're smart enough to figure it out. It's just an expression.
You can pretty much figure out what it means through the context, you know?
So Faith is like, we're gonna, you know, tear it up. Vamps beware, we're watcherless and fancy free, and Buffy's like, watcherless, and Faith's like, well, didn't yours go to England too? And then is when we cut to the library and sad Giles who gets left out of all the Watcher Council parties.
Which, okay, I have issue with this.
Okay,
he talks about the Watchers Council and their retreat that they do every year, right? And then how he never gets invited. But wouldn't the Watchers Council invite the only Watcher they know that has an actual Slayer? Like, wouldn't he be kind of high up on the list?
yeah,
Because they're all learning to do what he's doing. He's actually doing. They're learning how to do it. So, like, you would think he would be pretty high up on the list to be invited. Like, why would they ever snub the one person, well, I guess two with Faith's Watcher, the one person who is doing what they all want to be doing?
yeah.
You know?
Well, it's weird too because if Giles is indeed that disliked by the Watchers Council, why did he get the job in the first place to be the Watcher? Is it because they are also expected to have a short life expectancy? Because, I mean, I guess Merrick did. Merrick died. So, like, is the one who is actually assigned to the Slayer just expected to die? Faith's Watcher died. Like, do they just hope that that's a way to get rid of Giles? Because they don't like him?
Maybe, because I feel like they actually do die frequently. Because, like, honestly, if Wesley hadn't had Buffy and Giles to help him, he'd have died pretty quickly.
And everybody wanted to get rid of Wesley. There's a reason
Yeah.
he was assigned to be the current. Like, he was, like, they were like, let's get rid of this guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I would think, being what they are, the Watchers Council, what they are and what they do, they wouldn't assign the guy they don't like to have this one exalted job that is what all of them strive for and work toward and learn for and stuff, you know?
It's weird because it seems like the Watchers Council exists for the Slayer, but in truth, the Watchers Council exists for the Watchers Council, and in a way, they expect the Slayer to bend to their will.
I agree with that.
And that becomes like the weird, like, if we really want to get into this rabbit hole, we need to just let ourselves completely contemplate this and get into it when we get into Helpless. Helpless. Oh my God. Like, we'll talk at length about the weirdness of the Watchers Council when we get to that episode. One, they don't seem to be aware of things. They don't communicate things. They don't ever talk to the active Slayer Watcher duo that's been doing this all this time to communicate, hey, yeah, there's another Slayer around. Like, because Buffy's been surprised twice now by another Slayer.
Yeah, you would think that would be something that they would let all the Watchers know too.
Yeah. And it's just, it's weird. And there's a couple more weird bits, but that's okay, because right now we're going to talk about how Faith has taste.
Faith does have taste. I mean, obviously she's winding him up, but still.
Yeah.
She's got taste.
Still. I mean, you know, there's got to be some truth to that. There's a little bit after Faith talks about how young and cute Giles is, where Buffy's like, raise your hand if you. Xander raises his hand a little bit. Willow does not raise her hand.
Oh, Willow does not. Yeah.
And all the fanfic writers went nuts.
Yeah, I absolutely love that part where she doesn't raise her hand.
Yeah, she doesn't even like
attempt to raise her hand.
Like,
she's like,
kind of like, no.
I'm good here.
So Giles talks about how it might be fortuitous that Faith arrived when she did. Willow shouts loudly.
Aha! Sorry, I just meant, aha! There's a big evil brewing. You'll never be bored here, Faith, because this is Sunnydale, home of the big brew and evil.
Giles talks about some disappearances at Sunset Ridge District, and Buffy says that she's good to patrol, but she has to have dinner with her mom first, and this is when, again, another, like, awkward pause and editing choice and acting all around. Like, it just feels weird, and I guess the direction was like, this is really awkward, so play it up, and they did a great job, but Willow, like, tries to, like, subtly convince Buffy to invite Faith to dinner. Which she does, and then Buffy's like, great, then we can also patrol, together as well. This is when Willow is just like super, yay, let's hang out with Faith, and talks about how Buffy has to go have a health science makeup exam, and even when Buffy's kind of talking about coaching, Willow talks over her and is just like, we can hang out with Faith while she's testing, and let's go. And then they all run out talking about Faith and her stories, and Faith's there again, trying to play to everybody's interests, I guess. Talks to Giles about how they're going to talk about weapons later, and Buffy's just like, it's fine, I'm fine, it's fine, and I'll just sit. Yeah,
it doesn't really feel like Willow.
It doesn't, and it doesn't,
how she would act,
and it's all awkward, and it's not like it's like it's intentionally awkward, but not correctly awkward.
Yeah.
It's clearly intentional what they're doing, but it's also like doesn't make sense for these characters.
Well, I mean, it would make sense if it was her friend still being a little standoffish and awkward after her running away all summer.
Yeah.
And they're still like getting back their friendship, but they don't play it that way because at the very beginning, before Faith, everything was fine.
Yeah, and it's also weird. Like, I don't know what Willow's motivations are. Like, Willow wants to control Buffy's life enough, at least, to have influence on who she dates, but then she also doesn't want anything to do with Buffy and wants to go hang out with Faith. Like, there's just a lot of
weirdness.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that maybe if they were fleshed out more and stood by themselves would have made sense, but to have all of it and to have it to this degree doesn't make sense. Giles attempts again to talk about what happened with Akathla and Angel. Buffy again is very straightforward, explains the order in which they stood and how the sword went through. And Giles kind of tries to pry for a little bit more information. And this is where Buffy says, next time I kill Angel, I'll video it. Which I wrote, that might actually be a possibility. You never know. You never know who might just, like, come out of nowhere from beyond the grave at the end of this episode. And we already know that Angel can be, or vampires in general, can be captured on video, so that's not an issue. This is the scene where Willow and Xander have all the stories.
Yeah, they're walking around with Faith showing her around the high school, which does not seem to me to be something that Faith would enjoy, being shown around the high school. Like, why would she care?
Yeah,
but they're giving her a tour of the high school and telling her all the bad things and supernatural stuff that happened. And then she ends it by saying that you guys are a hoot and a half. Mm-hmm. If I had friends like you, I'd probably still have dropped out, but I might have been sad about it. Which is, again, showing us just how much of a bad girl Faith is.
Oh, yeah. She's a dropout. Yeah. She's a dropout biker chick trailer trash girl.
Yeah.
So, this is the most awkward section, where I'm not even sure what they're trying to go for, because Buffy's not even in this scene, but, like, Faith starts to ask about Buffy, and she's just like, she seems like she needs to have a little fun, like you two, and Willow starts to talk, and this is when Faith just, like, is just like, oh, water, and Xander immediately is just like, oh, and then the alligator story. It's just the most awkwardly, like,
arranged thing, yeah.
Like, the conversation progresses in such a weird way. Like, they actually kind of show for a moment that Faith is trying to figure out what's going on with Buffy, but that she doesn't actually care what's going on with Buffy. Like, she starts to ask, and then when it's actually, she might learn some stuff about what's going on or something like that, she just is like, oh, water, that's interesting. And then Xander changes the subject again. I don't understand what they're trying to go for with this idea of whatever Buffy's trauma is, or whatever Buffy's stories are, or whatever Buffy needs help with is just going to immediately be disregarded and, like, overshadowed by Faith's presence, even when Buffy's not in the scene. It would be something if, like, there was actually a little bit of a conversation here, even if it was just something like Willow was just like, oh, well, she's just, been going through some stuff and, is just trying to get back to normal. And vague, and Faith just would nod and say, oh, okay, and then go, oh, water. Then at least there would be something showing that there's still concern for Buffy amongst the friend group. But this almost seems like, especially when Xander's like, ooh, and then the alligator story. Didn't they already hear the alligator story to some degree at least? Or maybe he wants it again, or wants it in more full detail. He's just like, tell me that story again about the alligator.
Yeah.
Read me my bedtime story.
So Faith walks over to the water fountain to get a drink and bumps into Scott, who is talking to her. They're just having a little conversation when Buffy comes out and sees Faith now, who has kind of taken over her friends and her watcher, is now talking to the guy she might like.
Yeah.
And she kind of has a conversation with Willow and Xander about how she hadn't completely decided against Scott, because mentions getting Scott together with Faith. And at this point, you kind of start to think that Willow is trying to get Scott hooked up with somebody instead of Buffy.
Maybe it's Scott that Willow's trying to be wingman for, and has nothing to do with Buffy. Turns out Willow and Scott are besties off camera. We just didn't realize. Willow
ends up sharing a look with Xander and trying to talk like Faith a little bit. You really do need to find the fun, B. At which point Buffy looks at her and she immediately goes, Uffy?
Buffy then goes over to kind of interrupt the conversation that Faith and Scott are having, and quickly drags Faith away from that situation. Faith does make the comment that he's a cutie and asks if he is seeing anybody, which is, like, Faith wouldn't care.
Yeah, she doesn't want someone like Scott.
Not only would she not really care to, like, but, like, she just wants a hookup. That's all Faith's ever, shown to want. It's just a hookup. She doesn't care if he's seeing anybody, and she doesn't want to, like, go steady. That's not...
A very good point. That didn't occur to me, but you are right. Although I stand by that Scott's not her type.
No. But she can scratch the surface of his granola exterior and find the like freaky guy,
the bad boy within.
Yeah, she'll find that freaky side of him. She'll pull it out, and then she'll be into it. We say all this, and it's canon in the show that he's gay. So I guess
I don't remember that.
It's in Conversations with Dead People.
It is?
Yeah. Buffy's talking to Webster, Holden Webster, I believe is his name.
And he mentions it.
He talks about all the rumors about Buffy, and he says, Scott Hope says you were gay. And she was like, I dated that ringworm. And he was just like, well, he says that about all the girls that he dated. And it turns out, big surprise, he came out last year. So, yeah, okay, that's it.
I don't really remember that. I mean, I remember the conversation and her talking to him all night.
See, you forget about Scott Hope as soon as you hear his name. This is why he's the most forgettable character.
That did not stay with me.
Because it was about Scott Hope and no one cares.
Yeah.
All right. Kissing Toast and Mr. Trick. That's his name, right?
Yeah, Kissing Toast.
Trick is all excited about the fact that they are jacked into a T3 and have 2,500 megs per, and this is the whole world at our fingertips. He's a very tech savvy, cutting edge vampire.
Yeah, and then they very casually discuss human trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, they are evil, so.
Which this seems evil even for who they are. To me, okay, I can't believe that was just put in the script, but okay.
Okay. Kakistos is still very one-track mind. He wants the Slayer, and Trick's like that there's a rumor that this town already has one, which makes two, and then he has the great line, he's like, I'm not really sure how that happened.
Yep, nobody knows how that happened.
It's weird. But Kakistos is like, I don't care if there's 100, I'll kill them all. She's going to pay for what she did to me.
Then he kind of shows us his face.
It's not the prettiest face.
No, which we assume that Faith did that to him.
That would be the assumption. Trick kind of explains that he's looking through hotels and youth hostels and such.
Every hotel, rooming house, and youth hostel in town.
I'm just wondering how many youth hostels are in Sunnydale.
Right. How many of these places are actually in Sunnydale? Because, I mean, we've already established that it's a tiny, tiny town.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also...
So, how many do we have to look at?
Assume youth hostels... We know that hotels don't have to have the invite. We assume youth hostels, those kind of places, would also be like a no invite required thing. So what's even the point? That's just basically
Well, apparently there are so many in Sunnydale that he has to look through them because they cannot possibly go to them all in the tiny town of Sunnydale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are there actually places in United States that have youth hostels? Because I always kind of think of that as a European thing. I mean, maybe in Seattle or something.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I could imagine.
Do we have those here?
Maybe in a bigger town that also has I don't know. Sunnydale's doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, Sunnydale would not have them. Anyway,
my thought process on all of this though is so let's say Sunnydale has 100 hotels. It's just the most hotel-ridden thing. Wouldn't that be the worst place to stay though? Because vampires can just go into hotels.
Yeah.
They don't need an invite. So is that just an all-you-can-eat buffet for vampires?
Possibly. We never really do a hotel episode of Buffy or Angel of a hotel that is current and nice. Mm-hmm. Because what Faith is staying at is more like a motel or a rooming house type situation. And there's some episodes of Angel, but they're in a hotel that's can close down and stuff. So that's never really explored. Whether sometimes if a vampire just can't find anybody, they'll go to a hotel and be like, okay, worst case scenario, I'll have to go to the hotel to eat dinner.
Yeah, that seems I do like Trick's resourcefulness and just casually finding food. Let's just go through the drive-thru and grab the drive-thru worker. Let's just order pizza. Eat the pizza man. Let's eat the delivery boy. He's providing the service we requested. We wanted dinner. So yeah, from there we cut to the Summers house, and Joyce is serving dinner, almost entirely dedicating all of her attention to Faith, asking
all of the food to Faith.
All of these questions while piling Faith's plate full and completely ignoring Buffy. So again, there's not a lot of subtlety to what they're going for here.
Oh no, it's very, very blatant. And Joyce is kind of questioning Faith about the slaying and does she like it and all that. And then they start talking about how negative Buffy is about things. It's just like, okay, Mom, really? Joyce goes to get Faith another drink, and Buffy goes with her, and they have a discussion about Buffy giving up slaying because now Faith is here and Faith can take over for her. Mm-hmm. And Buffy's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. And then she accidentally lets slip to her mom that Faith is only there because Buffy died.
Yep.
And I think as a mom, I would have demanded more details about how she died. Because Joyce just seems to accept that at some point her daughter died and she knows nothing about it. And I would have been like, how did you die? When was it? What happened? You know? And then Joyce says she's tried to march in the Slayer Pride Parade, but she does not want Buffy to die. Mm-hmm. Which, the whole Buffy's mom finding out she's a Slayer has pretty much every time her and her mom talk about it, it has lots of shades of a LGBTQ youth coming out.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote that in my notes as well. Continue references to LGBTQ. This is where I start getting into comparisons of Buffy's reaction to Faith and Buffy's reaction to Kendra. Because, like, Buffy wasn't really thrilled about either one of them at the beginning. But Buffy, when Kendra first comes in, kind of has these same echoes that Joyce has, these same fleeting thoughts of, maybe I could just, not be the Slayer anymore. Maybe Kendra could take over. And Joyce is like, maybe Faith could take over. And there's just that kind of fleeting hope. Here at this point, Buffy's made her peace with the fact that she's going to have to continue to be the Slayer, even with another Slayer around, and is very, to the point. It was just like, no, this is still something I have to do. But it was interesting to I wish I had time to have watched that episode again, where Buffy is first introduced to Kendra, and then watch this episode and kind of see the reactions, especially when it came to Giles, because you kind of talked about the idea is like Faith's kind of taking over all of these relationships in Buffy's life. I think the one that really doesn't show is Giles. Like, Giles is flattered by her, but he doesn't ever really, build a bond with Faith. Whereas he built a little bit of a bond with Kendra, and there was more of that tension with Kendra when it came to Giles specifically. Whereas this, Buffy's talking about how well Faith gets along with her friends, her watcher, her mom, and now she's getting along with my fries, and she's even, making eyes at my not boyfriend. And I feel like there's an immediate instinct that Buffy has that we talked about in the Kendra episode, if I remember correctly, where she's like, I'm the Slayer, I'm the one who is the special one, and when there's another one that's taking that spotlight away, I'm going to fight against it. But then there's another layer that doesn't really like being the Slayer that she explored with Kendra, where she was just like, well, maybe I could just not be the Slayer, and maybe Kendra could be the Slayer. But she doesn't really have that with Faith, and I'm wondering if partly she just viewed Kendra as perhaps more capable than Faith, or Buffy just has learned enough since then to know that she has to be the Slayer, like she has to continue to play that role and make those hard decisions.
She doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
I have some issues with this here. It could be either one of those. But I noticed in this scene that when she looks in at Faith, Faith is just eating food as fast as she possibly can. Mm-hmm. Which kind of leads us to the conclusion that Faith is hungry.
Yeah.
Faith is actually starving. And, well, we can assume that before her watcher died, her watcher took care of her. Mm-hmm. But Buffy doesn't know that she's dead yet. But why is the Watchers Council, they know that her watcher's dead. Why haven't they sent someone to provide for Faith? Mm-hmm. Are they just going to let a Slayer starve on the streets? And then when Giles finds out that later in the episode, finds out that her watcher is in fact dead, that Faith has, nobody and no money or anything, he still, in the following episodes, doesn't take care of her.
Yeah.
Like, they let her stay in this rundown shack of a rooming house. They don't make sure she gets to eat or anything. And she's a kid. Mm-hmm. She's a kid with a really hard job.
And she is such a kid. Like, I forgot how much of a kid Faith is in the very beginning. Like, Faith feels incredibly young in this episode. Like, she talks big and she plays it up and she acts like she's bigger and more adult than she is. But truthfully, like, there's a several moments, and especially towards the end when she's so scared when Kakistos finally corners them, where you just see how much Faith is just running for her life, living on the streets, and is just terrified at all times. Like, she really has that front of being super savvy, super street smart, like, I can take care of myself attitude, but then she really can't. She's really in over her head and really vulnerable in a lot of ways. And there's some really nice, subtle things in this episode, like the fact that she's eating all the time. Like, you see that she's like, she can't stop herself from just eating as much as she can while sitting at that table.
Well, because she's starving and she doesn't know when she's going to get to eat again. Mm-hmm. And nobody in Sunnydale takes any notice of it.
Yeah.
You know? And honestly, until the mayor, no one bothers to take care of Faith.
Yeah. Like, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways why Faith was so easily persuaded by the mayor and stuff like that. I mean, he was, in a lot of ways, the first person to really take care of her in that sense.
And like, we have the impression that if while she was still in school and everything, we have the impression that Giles, if Buffy's mom died and she didn't have anybody while she was still in school and all that, as her watcher, he would take care of her. Mm-hmm. But we don't get that impression that he would do that for Faith.
Well, and it's also interesting, like, in a lot of ways they frame, like, Buffy supposed to be the odd one out when it comes to that relationship with the Watcher, and the fact that that's kind of built into the system, that the Watcher is to take care of the Slayer, because that's the way that it was presented with Kendra, and Kendra was more of a traditional, what the Watcher's Council prefers, which is she was raised by her Watcher, and then when she was called, she was already fully prepared for that calling. Buffy stays with her mom. She doesn't go and live with Giles and dedicate her life entirely to slaying. But then they kind of just forget about Faith. It's not even like they give her the option or anything like that. They just don't even care. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is definitely implied that Giles would take care of Buffy if something were to happen to Joyce. And, like, to some degree does in little ways later on, but we'll get into that because there's also issues with that. But yeah, so then we get into this scene between Buffy and Faith patrolling and just completely over each other, which is kind of weird. I guess there's been some built-up tension that Faith has sensed. Buffy's been pretty consistently not on the Faith bandwagon, which makes sense considering how much of a jerk everybody's been in her life since she showed up. But it's, again, one of those things where it's kind of like in situations of abuse, you deflect the anger that you have for the abuser on other people around you. It's kind of like she's putting all this anger that she probably should have on her for her friends for, you know, kind of being jerks lately. She have all that anger to her friends and she's putting it all on Faith, like it's all Faith's fault for showing up and I guess being charismatic enough for her friends to start ignoring Buffy. But yeah, like Buffy's really laying it out there and they have a pretty intense back and forth, especially when Faith brings up Angel, which of course is going to cause Buffy to have all kinds of feelings.
Yeah, but like, how does she know about Angel? She's not supposed to know this stuff. I'd be upset too.
Yeah, but again, I would be mad at my friends for telling her about Angel to this girl that we don't really know. Like, I mean, that's a very personal thing for Buffy. And I think it's also like a show that the Angel thing even though her friends know it was a big deal for Buffy, none of them really understand, like, or view it the same way. Like, because they'll casually talk about, oh, and that's where Angel tried to kill Willow earlier when they were doing the walk and talk, and like, that is a deep and very fresh wound for Buffy, and they're so casual about it. They're casual about this person that Buffy loved trying to kill them. You know, in just a little walk and talk about, like, oh, our high school shenanigans. This is when, you know, our best friend's soulmate tried to kill us. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And Faith, like, summarizes it up that, you know, you just ought to deal and move on, but you're not. And that's when Buffy really, you know, starts to get mad, which, yeah.
Well, and they kind of just step up to each other like they're fixing a fight, two Slayers, which happens later in the season and is awesome. But this episode, they don't fight because vampires attack.
Yes. So the whole, prior to the vampires attacking, the whole, you know, think you can take me kind of back and forth that they have, I immediately flashed back to Buffy's kick my ass speech to Angel in When She Was Bad. And I'm just like, the thing that's kind of awkward to me about the Faith storyline is that I feel like the Faith storyline is in a lot of ways echoes and similar to the Angelus storyline of, like, here's this ally, here's someone on our team, and then all of a sudden, big shock, they switch sides, and now we're gonna have to deal with fighting this person that, you know, we used to consider a friend. And so here we have, again, like, this foreshadow to this tension that's rising, and that this fight that's gonna happen later on, just like we did in season 2 between Buffy and Angel in the first episode. Here we have it between Buffy and Faith in their first episode together. But I feel like, as much as I love Faith, I was way more invested in the Angel going evil storyline than I was in the Faith going evil storyline.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And so I think, like, in a weird way, that's one of the weaker points for me, is that I feel like season 3 kind of repeats parts of season 2, but doesn't have as much weight to them, because we're not as invested in the Buffy-Faith relationship as we were in the Buffy-Angel relationship. Or even, like, Buffy's not as invested in that, and we feel what Buffy feels. Because I've never been, like, fully invested in Buffy and Angel as a ship, but Buffy's invested in, you can feel it. Whereas when Faith goes bad, and it's all kind of revealed for sure, I don't think that that's as emotionally resonant. But we'll get into that as we go forward. It's almost like a repeat of that type of story, but it's done in a way that's more like a what if, they just wanted to do a what if there was a bad Slayer. And part of me almost wishes that they had been more gung-ho to just do a bad Slayer from the start than to do this kind of, oh, we're gonna make them friends and start building up this relationship between the two of them, just to have that pulled away from Buffy as well. Just to have that storyline again, where Buffy has somebody who she cares about who turns out to betray her. Like, if you want to do a Dark Slayer, just go full-on Dark Slayer. Just have Faith come in, guns blazing. Anyway, yeah, vampires attack. Interesting enough. I don't have a great breakdown of this fight, but basically, Faith is so fixated on one vampire and just keeps welling on him as Buffy gets overwhelmed.
With 3 others.
Yeah. And, like, starts to get to the point where you're like, oh, what's gonna happen? And then, you know, you cut to a commercial break and it comes back, and of course Buffy is fine, whatever, because it's Buffy.
Well, yeah, because it's Buffy.
Interesting enough, I think there's a vampire that's just not accounted for at the end of this fight scene. Like, I think there's one that isn't staked, we don't see run off, but it just ceased to exist at the end of this when they just start talking again. Because I'm pretty sure after the cutscene, Buffy has 2 on her, Faith has the one that she's fighting, Buffy stakes one of the vamps, and then goes and stakes the vamp that Faith's fighting, and then the other one we never see from again.
Well, maybe it ran away.
It ran away. Off screen. Again, another throw out to Faith's life and people not really paying attention to Faith's trauma. In this, Faith shouts, my dead mother hits harder than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of clues that should be fairly obvious that Faith is having a really, really rough life, and I don't think that they spent enough time really acknowledging that in this. It kind of became a whiny Buffy episode, and as much as I love Buffy, I love Buffy, she's great. The whiny Buffy episodes, especially when faced with the fact that she's got a support system. She's the chosen one. She's the Slayer. She's got this burdened destiny, and she had to kill her boyfriend and stuff like that. But she's got a support system in her friends, her watcher, her mother, and it's just those things that she recently had to deal without because she spent a whole summer without that. So she understands what that feels like. And the fact that she didn't recognize sooner what Faith was going through, even though there's such obvious parallels between those two. Faith and Anne are basically the same character. It's just, Buffy should have been the first one to connect and recognize what was going on. And the fact that it took her so long is just frustrating. But this is just another, throw out their line that continues to show that Faith's been through some stuff.
Yep.
And, of course, the actual welling on the vampire that it's something that Faith does so well, of just releasing all of her rage on an entity, whoever she's mad at the time. We'll see that repeat in the Who Are You episode, where she does it to Buffy in her own body, where she's beating Buffy when she's technically beating herself. Faith has a lot of rage. So there's a lot revealed about Faith. Her rage, her fact that her family's gone. We talked about the fact that she's starving. We'll get into her living situation more and more. There's a lot built up to show that Faith just needs support is what she needs. And what nobody's willing to do it. Instead is Buffy yelling at her, "What is wrong with you?" And it's funny because she even does it, yells at Faith about, our job is to slay demons, not to beat them in a bloody pulp. This is a very similar conversation that Giles had with Buffy the season prior. Yeah. Where Buffy was just beating up on a vamp forever. And it's just a weird superiority thing that Buffy's got in this episode, and Buffy really has in her relationship and dynamic with Faith in general going forward.
And I'm better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw that at the beginning of the scene where she's talking about, I've been doing this longer than you. It's it's real obnoxious. And as much as I love Buffy, this is not a great episode for Buffy as far as showing her empathy, which I talk about being her strongest attribute. She doesn't really have it in this episode. she's not really fully in it right now. She's got a lot distracting her. Yeah. There's this whole Scott Hope guy taking a lot of attention away from things she needs to be focused on. So then we continue to have Buffy be the worst as she's complaining to Giles the next day. Giles is kind of making excuses for Faith, and Buffy basically, in not as many words, explains that Faith's insane.
And it's dude, listen to me.
Yeah. And even makes the joke about she doesn't need a life, she has mine. And Giles starts to say, I think you're being a little, and then this is one validating moment where she's just I'm being a lot. I know this. She at least is just I am really being
I know what I'm acting like.
I'm really being an obnoxious brat right now. I understand. But still, she's taking over my life, man. But she does make a point that she did nearly get them killed. And she says the girl needs help. She does. Faith does need help. The way that Buffy says this makes it seem like not the type of help that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I mean, she probably needs that kind of help too. Faith needs all the counseling. That's obvious. But also,
100%.
She just needs support. She just needs people that are just gonna be hey, it seems like you've had a rough go of it. Can I help in any way? So Giles says he's going to reach out to Faith's Watcher, which I feel like would be something that Giles would probably have felt a duty to do anyway, because Faith's whole story is that she snuck away, and Giles just experienced what it's like to not know where your Slayer is for 3 months.
Yeah, I think it's weird that he doesn't contact the Watcher to explain
like,
that.
By the way, if you call or try to get in touch with Faith and you can't and you start panicking, I got her. She's here.
Yeah.
Giles is talking about nightcaps and kayaking at the retreat, and then realizes that Buffy is still there, and he's just still not cool enough, I guess, to go to this Watchers Council retreat.
When he's literally the only one that has a Slayer.
So this is when Giles starts asking about specifics. Yeah, specifics to the vampires. Also seems like an odd bit of dialogue. Like, I don't know if we just never see this part. Anytime Buffy kills a vampire ever, if Giles is just like, well, let's try to figure out their lineage. What's their markings like? You know, how are they dressed?
Yeah, I mean, he says it like it's something they always do.
But yeah, and then I have a question. Buffy says that one of them said something about kissing toast, that he lived for kissing toast, and Giles immediately goes, Kakistos? And she's like, well, maybe it's taquitos. And he's just like, Kakistos? And it's just like, he instantly knows from kissing toast that it's Kakistos. So how exactly did it take him so long to figure out a Catholic? He went from kissing toast to Kakistos, and yet he was standing there staring at the box and couldn't figure out it was a Catholic.
Well, maybe he knows about Kakistos already.
Yeah.
Like, it was something he was recently reading about. There you go. He was recently reading about it.
Yeah, he was recently reading about taquitos. So yeah, he's all wound up and talking about that Kakistos means the worst of the worst, and it's also the name of a vampire so old that his hands and feet are cloven. Yeah,
like, what's that about? Like, the Master was supposed to be so old that's why his face looked like it did. Mm-hmm. So who's older?
Yeah, my understanding, and I think that this may also be explored some in the comics as well, but my understanding is that the older they are, the more demonic they look, but they may not necessarily show the same characteristics. So the Master was more like bat-like in the face, and that was his way of like becoming more demonic and showing his age. And Kakistos had like the cloven hands, and that was his demonic feature. So it's kind of different based on, I guess, the specific demon that took over your body, and if it lives long enough to start making those physical changes to you.
Yeah, I've literally always wondered about that. Like, which one was older? Which came first?
Yeah.
But
I don't think it's sense. Like you get bat vampire face and then you get cloven hands after that or anything like that. I think it's just like there's a random characteristic that becomes permanent to some extent if you get old enough. And I don't know if they ever really talk about the ages of Kakistos in relation to the Master on which one's older. But I always kind of viewed them as being similar in age because they kind of have similar levels of mutation. I think Kakistos could be a little bit older just because his seem a little bit more severe.
Yeah. You think he might get mad? Like, I don't want to have cloven hands and feet where I can't, do anything for myself anymore because I have no opposable thumbs. This isn't fair.
But he's lived a really long time, so, who can complain?
And the Master, his face, he can't, pass in public anymore.
Right.
So you think those things, people wouldn't like them very much.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough break being a vampire.
We are both on tangents, all kinds of tangents tonight.
Buffy talks about the fact that Kakiso showed up around the same time as her new little sister, which, of course, there's other parallels between Faith and Dawn that will be drawn later on in the season, so we'll continue with that later on as well. And Buffy says that there are two things she doesn't believe in, coincidence and leprechauns. And Giles is like, it's entirely possible that they both arrived here by chance simultaneously. And then this is where Buffy's like, I was right about the leprechauns, though. Which I think leprechauns do actually appear in the comics, so there you go. Aw. Buffy's wrong all across the board. So Buffy basically says she's going to go talk to Faith about Kakistos, and she walks out and immediately, like, runs into Scott again. And Scott is like, okay, so not trying to be a stalker here, so I'm going to stop after this, but Buster Keaton, you in?
Yeah. And Buffy decides, yeah, she's in. She's going to go.
Yeah.
She's going to give this a shot.
Is it just because she doesn't want Faith to take this away from her, too? Like,
Possibly.
Is this just like a reaction to the fact that Faith, like, what changed? That's the only real thing that we've seen, is that she watched him flirt with Faith for like a few seconds, and now she's like, you know what? It's now or never. I don't want to lose him to Faith. I don't want to lose another thing to Faith. Is this just a bitter acceptance to go to a Buster Keaton festival? Is that what it is?
Possibly. It is very possible, and that is sad.
Yeah. So, Scott, before even going on a date, decides to give Buffy a little present. So we get to revisit our counters, because, yeah, Scott is giving Buffy jewelry.
And we have received more jewelry.
Yeah. It's been a while since we've seen those counters. I don't even know.
Yeah, it really has. Let's see. I've got them in my phone. Let me look. Oh, yeah, this is way down here in my notes. Okay, there it is. Buffy Jewelry. We are at 3.5. And this makes 4.5.
4.5 Buffy Jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Not only does Scott Hope give Buffy jewelry before they go out on their first date, but it just so happens to be like the worst piece of jewelry he could possibly give her.
Yes. Which is interesting because in the script book, it is supposed to be just a brightly colored fun ring. And when Buffy opens it, she has a flashback to the Claddagh ring and connects those in her mind. But they are actually not supposed to be the same.
Oh.
Like, it's not supposed to be a Claddagh ring.
Wow. Why did they make that change? I feel like what was in the script made more sense. Like, if you're gonna give somebody a ring before you even go out on a date, like a brightly colored, like just kind of obnoxious piece of jewelry makes more sense than a Claddagh ring, which actually has,
lots of meaning.
But then it would have also shown that, like, Buffy's so still connected to that part of her life that even something that doesn't really have any visible like similarities to the Claddagh ring other than the fact that it's a ring still triggers her, I think would have been even more revealing to where Buffy is right now. Like the fact that he just manages to be the unluckiest guy ever and give her the exact ring that is the most triggering to her in that moment seems so unlikely, but just to give her like some random ring and then for some reason Buffy's brain still connects it to the Claddagh ring, I think would have made that entire scene play so much better. And I'm kind of upset that they didn't do it.
Yep. Okay, it says Scott hands her the box. She looks in and her smile fades. In the box, a Claddagh ring, just like the one Angel gave her. Scott, do you like it? She steps back, drops the box, and we have a flash cut to Angel putting the ring on her finger in episode 13 of season 2. Scott picks up the ring, and it is not a Claddagh ring, but a simple friendship ring colored with plastic.
Interesting. Now I kind of want to go, like, I think it's the Claddagh ring throughout in the episode. Did you watch it closely? Okay.
I checked. It's a Claddagh ring throughout.
Okay. All right. I just want
because I thought that too when I was reading through the script book. I was like, how did I never notice that it actually wasn't a Claddagh ring? And I watched really close. Yeah, it is.
Well, anyway, yeah, Buffy freaks out and drops it, and Scott takes the message and kind of leaves, and then Giles comes up to check on Buffy, who doesn't even really seem to realize that it's Giles at first, and then kind of acknowledges that he's there and says that she's fine, and then asks if he was able to reach the retreat, and he said yes, and that Faith's watcher is dead. So
yeah, and I feel like at this point they assume that Faith killed her watcher, which makes no sense to me why they would just assume that.
Yeah, I never really thought that, but it plays like that in like, it was kind of, there's an accusatory edge that Buffy has in the next scene as well. So yeah, I could definitely see that being a way to read that, which is weird. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like that at all.
It doesn't say anything about that in the script. That's just the way it looks to me.
Yeah, but I could, like, the fact that reading's there and valid and, like, could easily be interpreted as such. Like, I can see that. I'm just like, yep, weird. So now we go to Faith's current living situation, which is not great. It's a pretty rundown motel-looking room, and she's having conversations with the manager, who's talking about how it's $18 a day. That's every day. And she's kind of trying to persuade him to let her pay later, and, you know.
Tells him he'll own the place one day.
Yeah. Kind of trying to flirt her way out of this situation a little bit. Buffy appears at the door, and the manager's like, roommates are extra.
I don't know why he would automatically assume that, though.
Yeah. So after he leaves, Faith even acknowledges, she's like, what brings you to the poor side of town? So she's, you know, really putting it out there right now. She's like, this is my living situation, and we both know what your living situation is, so let's just lay this all out here. This is the difference between you and me. And Buffy just completely, like, drops the bomb, says there's a guy that goes by the name Kakistos. Faith is pretty much in panic mode as soon as she discovers that he's here in town, and she quickly, like, grabs a bag and starts packing. And this is when the, like, really weird double standard happens that I am not cool with. And this is probably the worst look that Buffy has ever had, when she starts yelling at Faith for running from her problems. Yeah. Do not like...
Like, really, Buffy? Pot kettle.
And Faith, as she's packing her bag, says, like, you don't know me, you don't know what I've been through. I'll take care of this. And then, like you said before, Buffy says, like, you took care of your watcher. And, like, when you said that earlier, I immediately flashed to this line. I'm just like, oh my god. But then, like...
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense to me that they assume she killed her watcher.
Yeah.
You know? Or that they want to blame her for her watcher's death. Well, I mean, are we blaming Buffy for Miss Calendar's death?
Yeah. I mean,
it's literally from the very beginning, they are different with Faith than they are with Buffy.
Yeah.
They just, yeah.
Well, and it's... So, there's things thematically that work if they had been done right. Is that if we see this as Faith representing the bad parts of Buffy, the parts that Buffy, you know, self-loathes, then there's a certain aspect of Faith reminding Buffy of those parts of herself, and then not wanting to be around Faith because it's like all of Buffy's worst qualities and all of this. But it's still very much centered on Buffy, and really just kind of makes Buffy look like a big, jerky, bratty, superior, know-it-all, worst person ever. And that's kind of how I feel in this episode. It's like, I think, like, the idea is that the things that Faith are doing are reminding Buffy of the things that Buffy handled wrong, but rather than Buffy using it as a teaching tool to help guide Faith through this stuff, it kind of just uses it as a way for Buffy to not like Faith. It kind of comes together at the end, but it's so forced, so rushed, and you don't really have closure between them. The closure is more about Buffy and Buffy settling with her trauma of killing Angel at the end of this episode, and doesn't really have anything to do with this weird tension that's been building up between Buffy and her seeing her bad choices in Faith. There's not really that conversation. There will be more to this, obviously, going forward, and we'll get to explore it more. I'm really excited about exploring the Buffy Faith dynamic and the Faith being kind of Buffy's shadow self and how that's gonna go forward. But this first episode really just, I feel like, missed the mark in a lot of places.
I'm curious. I think I'm going to look it up when we're here in a minute, but whether or not they always meant for Faith to be in as many episodes as she's in, or if she was supposed to be like Kendra and just come for an episode and then maybe come back later.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I know there had to be a point pretty early on, and I would imagine even in the first episode, where they kind of had Faith's arc figured out of the bad Slayer, the Dark Slayer. But I don't know if they really had any plans for her after that. I really think Faith's best run is in the 4-part crossover in season 4 of Angel or season 4 of Buffy and season 1 of Angel. I think that's some of the most gripping storytelling in all of the show, and it really is a great redemption arc for Faith of dealing with what she's done and owning up to it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Faith was supposed to only be on the show for 5 episodes.
Oh.
But that she impressed Whedon so much, he decided to change course for the character. And the original plan for her was, after she accidentally killed the deputy mayor, she was to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that would have been dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had no idea. So, yeah, I guess pretty early they did change it.
Yeah, I always assumed that they had always planned for her to be a
bad Slayer.
Yeah, be a villain in that. Which is why I felt like they kind of copped out on this whole idea of building this relationship and then having her just go dark, kind of like what they did with Angelus. But I guess that was a last-minute decision to try to get more story out of her and do more with that actress. It also makes me wonder if, like, maybe some of the ideas that they had regarding suicide was blended into the Earshot episode.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, Buffy and Faith, let's get back on the episode we're actually on.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Buffy and Faith are kind of still arguing back and forth. Buffy's like, if you run, he's just going to run after you. And Faith's like, well, that's where the head start comes in handy. And she goes for the door. But it turns out the knock on the door earlier was not her, hotel manager, but in fact, her dead hotel manager being held up by Kakistos and all of his pals. And yeah, Faith kind of loses her mind here, and this is where you see just how young and vulnerable and scared she really is.
Yes.
She implodes in a way.
Apparently, in the original script, Faith, she starts saying no, mm-hmm. and that happens in the episode. But as they try to barricade the door and Kistos' fist comes through it, Faith starts screaming and kind of like panic. It says she starts panicking and screaming, and Buffy slaps her to calm her down. It says, "Scream later, escape now." And then kind of like pulls her toward the window. Yeah. I thought I was like, I don't remember that at all. So I watched closely and it didn't happen.
Yeah, don't like that. Okay. So here's the thing. So yeah, they escape as the vampires are breaking through the door. They kind of run through the alleys seemingly randomly, and then they get to a location and they stop and have a little conversation, and Faith kind of says that, you know, that she was there when he killed her watcher, and, you know, she tried to stop him, but she couldn't, and she had to run. And this is like one like little redeeming moment where Buffy says, "That's you know, that's good. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, don't die. You did the right thing." And then they realize that they're actually in the vampire's nest, and then
that they were.
Yeah, and then Buffy,
herded.
Yeah, Buffy has this line like he drove us here, but like how? I guess there was some stuff cut because I guess Mr. Trick directed the vampires, and maybe there was a bunch of like chase scenes that we didn't see.
Okay, here. Okay, so basically this is what it says happens in the script book, and they cut a lot of this out. But it says that Buffy and Faith running like hell. Buffy grabs Faith and they veer off the street. They vault a hedge and cut through a property. Mr. Trick points down the street. Vampires 6 and 7 keep going straight. Kikisto leaps the hedge, following them. Mr. Trick and Vampire 5 cut hard right, splitting into 3 different flanks now. And then it suggests and this is literally what it says, how about a big-ass aerial shot of them splinting off in 3 directions?
Yeah.
But basically, the Kikistos and his people were supposed to go off all in different directions and kind of surround them. Mm-hmm. It says later that they burst into the street and 2 vamps are on the other end of the street, so they run the other way, and Trick and the other vamp are coming from that direction, and then they turn down an alley, and it's a few feet from an abandoned firehouse, and they jump through the abandoned firehouse, and that is the thing. So it was supposed to be where they...
I figured it had to be, but it's just so funny watching the actual, like, edited version that we got, because it's basically like, we jumped out the window of your hotel and then ran down an alley randomly, and somehow they drove us directly to their nest.
Yeah, they had to have cut stuff out.
Didn't really match up what we saw on screen. So yeah, they're in the vampire nest, and vampires are coming in, and they have their encounter. Kikistos walks into the building, and he goes directly for Faith. Buffy encourages Faith and says, you know, Faith, don't die, and tosses her a crowbar, which Faith starts to use, but Kikistos like immediately gets the upper hand and
takes it from her. Yeah.
Just like she hits the ground, and yeah, Kikistos kind of has the upper hand. This is just such an awkward little back and forth. Trick is watching this all unfold as they're fighting, and even says that the master could get killed. So I guess Kikistos is the master level of...
I find it weird that they had Mr. Trick say that.
Yeah. But and then it's just like, well, our prayers are with him, and then leaves, and even talks about the kind of cliche nature of it. And I didn't really get into that a lot. I feel like this kind of works in a little ways like School Hard worked in season 2, of like that rejection of tradition, and like Trick is kind of rejecting tradition much in the way that Spike rejected tradition in that episode. So, you know, you see Kikistos here, and he's in like this old-timey garb and is very traditional in his vengeance, and Trick's all about the tech, and he's got a slick suit and all of that. So, and talking about the big picture. So he leaves. And yeah, Buffy tries to stake Kakistos, and the stake apparently doesn't drive through his hide. And so Kakistos says, I guess you need a bigger stake. And then Faith picks up like a beam and just awkwardly shoves it through him.
With some very, very high-tech CGI.
And it's just like the most anticlimactic way of dusting this vampire that's been built up so much. But hey guys, do you remember the 3? And then it's just awkward because they're both there and panting and hot and bothered. And then Buffy says, you hungry? And Faith's like, starved.
And they walk off together. But nothing's really settled, even though you're supposed to think it is.
Yeah. And then it's just the next day, at the library, Giles is explaining that the council has approved Faith to stay indefinitely, and that he's to look after both of them until a new watcher is assigned. And Buffy's like, yeah, well, she really came through in the end. And I'm just like, oh my god. Buffy, you're the worst. But, and then again, we have the parallels here where she's just like, you know, she had a lot that she had to deal with, but she got it behind her. And then she looks down and is quiet and then says Angel was cured. And yeah, and she has this whole speech about
this scene is actually one of my favorite scenes. You know how sometimes in the show you'll like think about it and you'll be like, I want to go back and I want to watch that one scene, but not the whole episode. I just want to see that scene. This is one of those for me.
Yeah.
Angel was cured. Your spell worked at the last minute, Will. I was about to take him out and something went through him. And he was Angel again. He didn't remember anything that he'd done. He just held me. But it was too late and I had to. So I told him that I loved him. And I kissed him. And I killed him.
And I love it, but I also have questions about it.
Okay.
Because Buffy tells them what happened with Angel. It's very emotional. And you can just see that Willow and Giles are both devastated for her. That they understand how hard it was and possibly now understand why she ran away. Mm-hmm. But when Buffy leaves, Willow tells Giles, I know you don't like me playing with magic, but I can really help with this binding spell. And Giles says, there is no spell. Mm-hmm. Or there is no binding spell. And I'm curious, like, what that meant. There's a look on Willow's face like she realized something. I don't really understand what it is.
I mean, for me, the obvious read here is that Giles understands that there's some unresolved issues, the catalyst for Buffy running, and that it is most likely to do with what happened surrounding Angel's death. And so, as a way to try to get Buffy to open up, he invents this spell to use as an excuse to ask Buffy about that experience.
That never occurred to me. Oh my gosh.
So, like, the spell doesn't exist. It's just him using it as a way to get Buffy to open up.
I love that. That never occurred to me. I always kind of had a vague idea that maybe it was a spell to bind Angel, but he didn't want to tell her that. And so now that he knows Angel was cured at the last minute, there's no spell anymore. But it didn't really make sense. And when I was reading the script book, it said, after Giles says there's no spell, a moment as Willow gets it. Mm-hmm. And then Giles looks a moment more toward the door, then heads into his office. And I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
I don't understand what she gets, what she's supposed to get. But now that makes complete sense. I get it. he was trying to. I wish they'd made it a little more obvious.
Yeah,
that I've watched this show at least half a dozen times all the way through, and certain episodes way more than that, and I never got that.
Yeah, I don't remember ever like when the moment of discovery was for me on that. But the one thing that I will say about this show is that as much as I make jokes about sometimes it being not subtle at all, because there was times where it's not subtle at all, there are some really nice nuanced bits, and that the fact that you can continue to discover things after watching it, like you said, dozens of times, is the coolest part of this show to me.
Right? I am in amazement right now. But like I said, I never got that scene, even though it's one of my favorites when she finally tells them, and I love to watch that scene. I never really got it. Mm-hmm. Because it did not occur to me he was just trying to get her to open up.
Yeah. He's a sneaky little watcher.
It makes complete sense.
Yeah. I really like that scene a lot too. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful moment of connection for those characters, those three characters in particular, which I think, even though Xander is part of the core four, Xander, I don't think, is emotionally developed enough to work in a scene like this. These three are so emotionally intertwined and just get one another, even though Willow's been off most of this episode. This moment here of her understanding both, the pain that Buffy's going through, but also the ways in which Giles helped Buffy to start talking about that pain.
Yeah. I love it.
It's great.
I literally always assumed that it was, for some reason, there was not a spell anymore because Angel got cured. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't needed, or it was for Angel, or any kind of thing like that. And I never knew exactly what, and I always thought they should be more clear. But, oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's a really good scene.
Yeah.
I just made one of your favorite scenes even better. I'm so happy.
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay, so it's Scott Hope. Buffy's waiting for him outside of his class. He comes out. This is very awkward. This is so awkward. Like, Scott looks so uncomfortable through all of this. He looks like he's ready to run at any moment. The fact that he comes back and is just like, okay, yeah, where do you want to go? At the end, just like, that is not how you played that scene at all.
he's kind of awkward most of the time though. And throughout the rest of the episode, it was kind of an adorable, geeky awkward that you're like, oh, I'm wonderful.
He's like, I'm barely comfortable, trying to flirt with you. I'm not prepared for you trying to flirt with me. This is too much.
Yeah. Yeah, this scene, it's the awkward gets awkward, not cute awkward.
I do love Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance of just rambling on.
It's very good. And if I knew I was going to talk this long, I would have brought some water.
Oh, it's great. It's great. But yeah, Buffy basically says that there was someone and she was confused, but she really likes what he had to say about friendship and would love to go to the film festival, and he agrees, and she says that she just has one thing that she has to do tonight before they can go, and she walks into a very empty mansion, and is basically right there where she killed Angel, as she places her Claddagh ring on the ground and says goodbye. And yeah, she leaves, and it shows the Claddagh ring, and it kind of fades to dark, and you think it's gonna be the end of the episode, except nope, there's a little bit of a light and a little bit of a tremor and more lights, and then a very wet, naked Angel falls from some kind of portal that popped out of nowhere for a second. In the flash of light, he falls and lands where the ring was, and yeah.
Angel's back!
Presumably, very confused about what's going on.
Yeah, honestly, his face in this scene, he just looks like he's in pain.
Yeah.
Like shock and pain. He's supposed to look psychotically insane and feral, but I don't see that in this scene. He looks like something hurts, and he's confused.
He's just like, he looks like he's had an all-nighter that he's having a bit of a rough morning. It's maybe not as dramatic as they were thinking when they wrote that down in the script. But yeah, Angel's back. We never figure out how or why. As far as I know, he's just back.
There are theories in Angel that they mention it several times that the first brought him back because he had prophecies to fulfill. Mm-hmm. But no, it's never actually like confirmed why. That they think the first brought him back. And then there's this one part where they think they talk about how the senior partners of Wolfram and Hart did it because he had a role to fulfill in the coming apocalypse. Mm-hmm. But that's never actually confirmed either. They just kind of discuss that that's what could have happened, the first or the senior partners.
Yeah, I know there's stuff in the comics that deal with the big prophecy stuff that Angel has roles in, but I'm still not sure if it ever really definitively says who brings him back in this moment. Like, I don't know if that happens. I've read some of the Buffy comics post the TV series. I don't think I've really read hardly any of the Angel comics, so I assume that that's probably where that information would be.
I wish I could have gotten into the comics, because I would have loved to have read continuation of these universes, but I just cannot get into comic books no matter how much I try. I wish I could.
Well, and there's some things that I like about the comics. There's a lot of things that I'm just like, woof, this would not have worked in the TV show. And not just like the wacky comic book stuff like Spike flying around in a spaceship, which definitely happens in the comics. Spike has a spaceship for a while in the comics. But there's also stuff that's just like uncomfortable in the comics that I'm not into. But yeah, that is nothing to do with this episode. This episode is all about just a big old naked angel appearing out of nowhere. That's all I took away from this episode. How about you? Yeah, it's not as good as I want it to be, considering it's the introduction of Faith. That's what I'll say about this episode. I think a lot of stuff was very rushed. There was a lot of time spent on the Scott Hope stuff, which I'm not the most invested in. And the big, final boss was pretty lame. All things considered.
Yep. We always talk longer on the episodes that we're just we're just like, oh, that one's not that great. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that?
But I thought this episode, I liked it more than I actually like it. And that's the thing that was disappointing to me. Like, I was just like, oh, this is a good one. We get to get Faith. We get to get Mr. Trick. I'm ready. And then I watched it. I was just like, this is weird. It is super clunky. And, like, Faith just doesn't really feel like Faith yet. Like, they're still trying to work that out. And Buffy's the worst in this episode. Oof.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, the next episode is Beauty and the Beast. And it is not one that I like very much. It's really hard, this episode, to enjoy it because it introduces two people we have literally never met and has basically the whole episode revolve around them.
Mm-hmm. We see how well that worked with Scott Hope on this episode, so they figure, let's do that again.
Well, I mean, they're basically Scott's best friends that now are all of a sudden part of this group.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this happened too fast.
As much as I enjoy season 3, this little section right here at the beginning where it's just like, let's visit with Scott Hope and his friends, and I don't care about any of these people.
Yeah, the next episode kind of feels like to be when a show is trying to test and see if they can spin off a character. And
why didn't we get the Scott Hope spinoff? Tell me.
Right. And it's not good. I don't like the next one. But I'm sure we'll talk for 3 hours about it, though.
Easily. All right. So that is our episode, and we thank you so much for listening. And this is where we say bye.
Bye.
We get to revisit our counters for the first time in a... Just a second. My cat just tried to break everything by knocking over something he shouldn't have been able to knock over. So we have a door currently off of its hinges because we had to remove it to move a couch.
Oh.
And he knocked over the door.
I bet that scared him.
It scared me.